After basic training, AIT and OCS, he was commissioned an infantry officer. He then went to jump school and special warfare school at Fort Bragg and Vietnamese language school at Fort Bliss. Then came tour of duty in Vietnam, where he commanded a 5-man advisory team working with the South Vietnamese Regional Force troops in the Mekong Delta.
After he got out of the Army, he moved to New York to study acting. He soon was cast as Sergeant Frank Evans in a continuing character in the NBC soap opera Somerset. He appeared on other soaps, on children's TV, and in public affairs programming.
He also worked on Broadway and regional theaters around New York, and he appeared in TV commercials and PSAs in the 1970s. He also had roles in feature films, several of them, including The Cotton Club and Presumed Innocent, and was a spokesman on more than 1,000 TV and radio commercials.
In 1991, he moved to Los Angeles and began his work in primetime television. After several years of guest starring roles on dramas and sitcoms and in feature films, he had recurring roles in several sci-fi series, including The X-Files and Star Trek Enterprise. We proudly present the VVA Excellent in the Arts Award to Tucker Smallwood.
All of these awards are special, but this was super special to me. I've known Tucker for a long, long time. He was an active member in the early days of the Manhattan chapter number 126 when we first got kicked off in the early 80s, and was helping get off the ground and become a very viable chapter in Manhattan. So it's really nice to see it swing all the way around this time. Thanks, Tucker.
This is very special to me. VVA is my very first veteran service organization. I wasn't political, but I was present at the dedication of the wall. I was present in New York City in May of 1985 when the very first parade in America for Vietnam veterans was held. I met a lot of guys that day. They're all still my friends, those of them still above ground. I miss the ones who were gone. I remember fondly the ones who were still here. I became a national delegate in 1987 and went to Detroit, where I met Bobby Mueller and Mary Stout, some of our earlier leaders, and John Rowan, some of our present leaders. It's been a long time. I went out on a mission with a Phoenix team. I was the only man on that mission that spoke English. And I got blown up pretty badly. They didn't expect me to live very long because people with my injuries didn't live. So I decided to learn acting so that I could be a better TV director with what time I had. I moved to New York, I resigned my commission, and I studied acting. And I had success, not just modest success, I had great success. Emmy nomination, all of the jobs that they mentioned and more. I did very, very well for 10 years. And then my wheels came off. I have PTSD. I've lived with PTSD for over 40 years. I advocate for the treatment of PTSD. Generally, we're pretty private about that sort of thing. But I'm only here for one reason. Two of my VVA friends, chapter members, cared enough about me to give me a book. And I read these interviews of veterans and their brothers and their fathers and their sisters and their children, and I recognized myself. I said, God, that's me. That's me. And I asked for help. And Dr. Victor DeFazio saved my life. And I promised myself then, if there's anything I can do to help another veteran from going through what I went through, I'm going to do it. And I am very proud to speak on behalf of those veterans. that you're honoring tonight exists because I got help. And yet we know that 22 veterans every day in their life because they haven't gotten that help that they need. It isn't available to them. I want to tell you about a program called the Soldiers Project. There are a handful of initiatives in America that treat veterans with PTSD. This was formed 10 years ago. We have branches in Los Angeles and Sacramento and Seattle and Tacoma, in Chicago, in New York City and Long Island, and in Pennsylvania and Wyoming. We have found a network of caregivers who donate their time. They give their services pro bono to veterans and to their loved ones, open-ended. All veterans post 9/11. The services, the care that they provide is confidential. That's the most critical thing. I can speak to you and tell you that I needed help, and that's hard for us to say. We're not wired like that. We're wired to drive on. And so men and women come home damaged, and they feel ashamed to ask for help. They don't want their family and their friends to know that they are in need. And so they medicate themselves. And we have all these programs that provide education and housing and job training. And it's hard to pay a mortgage. It's hard to keep a job. It's hard to keep a family together when you're not well. So we have to get care for these soldiers. We just have to do it. I hope it will never be okay for any of us to hear 22 veterans in their life every day. Boy, that's awful. Okay, so what's on tonight? No, that's not going to do. Now, we know the VA just got $16.5 billion. We know that the VA has been through a lot of changes. But a lot of our people are not going to go through the VA to get the help for a number of reasons. Some of them have bad paper. Some of that bad paper is because they were troubled by what they did in war. The care is not confidential. And that's critical to people because going on boat rides and mountain climbing and jumping out of planes and horseback riding is great fun, but it does not cure PTSD. You have to go into a room. You have to go into a room with a caregiver that's private, and it's not going to be fun. It's going to hurt. There's going to be tears. There's going to be snot. There's going to be anger. There's going to be fear. But slowly we can get better, and we can regain quality of life, and we can decide we do want to live. Yes, survivor guilt is an awful thing. People that I loved and cared about didn't get to come home. Who am I to be alive? And so we find a way to subvert it. We find a way to sabotage our success. That's not okay. So, I want you to do two things. I want you to go back to your chapters because this is a leadership conference. I want you to think about supporting the Soldiers Project. Why? Those veterans came along after 9/11. What was our pledge? That's what I love so much about us. Never again will a generation of veterans abandon the next generation. They need care. Now the Soldiers Project has these branches, and we could have more branches. There are other caregivers that want to volunteer and support what they're doing, but the administrative costs exist. We only have a budget of approximately $500,000 a year, and yet we struggle to raise money. We're not like Wounded Warriors. We don't have television commercials. We don't have people who can say, look, I have a new arm, I have a new leg, I can ride my bike and play with my children. I love that. But people with PTSD are never going to do something like that. It's a private thing. So, they need your help. I want you to go online and look them up. And I want you to advocate with VVA. I want you to adopt us. I want you to make us our ward. Don't you worry. I'm going to be knocking on the door of Wounded Warriors and American Legion and a few other agencies too. But the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans need this care now. That's number one. Number two, we don't have enough caregivers. World War II came along, we had a Marshall Plan. We didn't have tanks, we didn't have jeeps, we didn't have airplanes. We went out and geared up and we built them. I want VVA to underwrite the education of one caregiver, just one, because the VA has got to provide training for hundreds of these. It takes 6 or 7 years for a caregiver to get qualified to come online. We're going to need it. Remember, I did very well for 10 years. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. What we see now will be nothing compared to what we will see in 2020 and 2025. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to need this help. And it affects not just us, our children, our friends, our family, our neighbors, our co-workers. It's like a stone thrown into a pool. Those ripples keep on going. So I want you, it's going to have to be a congressional initiative. I know that there are fine statesmen in Congress, and I want you to be willing to advocate. Take it up. We send people to West Point. We send people to Annapolis to lead our troops. I want us to write the scholarships for caregivers, and those people are going to owe us a few years when they get out. They're going to have expertise, and they're going to make this country a better place. Thank you for this honor. Thank you for the work and the advocacy that you do. I am very honored tonight.
Before we go any further, we'd like you all to turn off your cell phone or turn it to airplane mode and not turn it back on until we get to 10,000 feet. Okay?